All right, we are on chapter 25 of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and we're getting the advice to Pandit Shashidhar from Pandit Shashidhar or to Pandit Shashidhar, and we've been talking about Gyanis and Vigyanis lately. And tonight's section is going to start off. Last week we ended with the nature of Gyanis and Vigyanis. You know, a Gyani is the knower who's aware of milk, been taught about milk, knows the whiteness of milk, can expound on the whiteness of milk. But the Vigyani is the one who has tasted milk, can cook with milk, can create sandesh. It's a very practical, useful thing in his life. So it's kind of an interesting little trajectory that we're on. So right now, we're not really Gyanis or Vigyanis. You know, we're sort of aware of the idea of God and we suspect it's true. We might think that we know and feel more deeply than that, but really, none of us are walking on water. We're not going to the beach and running out to Hawaii and back. So we're not Vigyanis. Vigyanis are able to take the truth and use that truth functionally because they know it to be so in an experiential sort of way. The teachers, the Gyanis, they have an idea. They may have had some experience, uh, but they can expound on all these things, but they can't use them in the same way. They haven't integrated them actually into a way that they can be functional in life, like a Jesus or Buddha or Rama. And so tonight we're going to look at the all-embracing realization of the Vigyani, right? The V in front of Gyani means super, more, greater, better, super Gyani, as it were. So the all-embracing realization of the Vigyani master. If there is butter, there must be buttermilk also. If you think of butter, you must also think of buttermilk along with it, for there cannot be any butter without buttermilk. Just so, if you accept the Nitya, you must also accept the Leela, right? So the Nitya is the unmanifest absolute, and the manifest is the Leela, the game, the word, right? So it's word in potential form where it's not moving, not changing, not manifesting, and then word expressing the vibration, the story, the narrative. So if you accept the Nitya, if you're going to accept God with no form, then you're also going to have to accept God with form. It is the process of negation and affirmation, right? So we know who we are by either of those two methods. The negation saying, I'm not this, I'm not this, and I'm not this. And so we sort of get a clear idea that we're not body, mind, or anything else. And we sort of step backwards until we fall into the lap of the divine. The other method is saying that I'm everything, but this is a path that Ramakrishna does not recommend. Because when we say I am that or I am God, we don't know who the I is that we're talking about. And so we tend to connect it to our ego I. And if you say the ego I is God, you're in a huge amount of trouble. You have misbehaved so badly that you're going to have to be slapped around by karma a little bit. So this notion of I am everything is nice, is one of those things you keep tied in the corner of your dhoti, but it's not a good way of thinking because it will, if you digest it improperly, you're going to have a spiritual shipwreck. So we use the process of neti if we're following the path of jnana. And even if we're a bhakta, you can use that a little bit around the edges to kind of bring yourself closer in to Mother while you're meditating. So he's saying that you should always let things that indicate things indicate those things. So, well, you can't think of butter without buttermilk because it's required to make butter. You have to have buttermilk. And so the Nitya and the Leela, you can't have the silence without the word, right? So we've talked about these in kind of weird little, very subtle ways. Like in one sense, when Eckhart Tolle talks about you should be as aware of the space between the silence between words as you are of the words themselves, right? Because the silence indicates the words, and the words indicate the silence, right? You can't have silence unless you have sound, and you can't have sound unless you have silence, because you need a background. And so this notion of the silent of words indicating silence, and movement indicating stillness, and objects indicating emptiness, right, or space, and vice versa on all of those. And the reason that that habit is so important is because that's how we take a world that distracts us from God and train the mind to use it in a way that makes you think of God, right? So when you are sitting there with a very noisy mind, there's you basically have two options. You can sit there and get really disturbed and disappointed with how noisy your mind is, and thus make your mind more noisy and a sense of sadness in it for lack of control. Or you can just ignore that it's being noisy, let it be noisy, and understand it from the perspective that if you can see that the mind is noisy, then you are obviously sitting in a place that isn't, right? And so you let the noise of the mind indicate the peace within yourself. You let the objects of the world indicate the spirit. Let word indicate absolute stillness, absolute silence. So this is what he's talking about. If you accept the nitya, you must also accept the lila. It is the process of negation and affirmation. You realize the nitya by negating the lila, right? So by saying anything that changes is unreal, you negate the lila, the play of God, the action, the movement of God, the manifestation, expression. I like to talk about the expression of the divine ideal, the divine principle of Satchitananda. It is the process of negation and affirmation. You realize the nitya by negating the lila. Then you affirm the lila, seeing in it the manifestation of the nitya. One attains this state after realizing reality in both aspects, personal and impersonal. The personal is the embodiment of chit, consciousness, and the impersonal is the indivisible Satchit Ananda. All right, so you see what he's saying there. It's that we, at first, in spiritual life, we have to separate ourselves out from things, from objects, from anything that changes, right? That's how we find out who we are in our true nature. Once we come to know that we are in our true nature, then we affirm everything, because we understand that that nature is the container of the Leela. So this divine absolute is the boundless container. Let me say it that way. It's the boundless container of all that changes. And so we reaffirm then that everything is God in the end, in the beginning. So in the beginning, or in the end. So in the beginning, I'm not this, as we try and really establish the knowledge of ourself as not being the body and as not being the mind. We have to get that to a place where it's not an abstraction, where we don't believe that's just a philosophical differentiation. We have to begin to experience ourselves as not body and not mind, which means that's saying it in the negative. To say it in the positive, know yourself to be a witness only. That you have never been able to do anything, nor will you ever be able to do anything, right? That all of your doership is an imagination on your part caused by attachment, right? And so you're attached to the body, and when the body goes to get food, you think, I'm going to get food. But in fact, you've never done such a thing, right? Okay. So the personal and the impersonal, it's saying the same thing. God with form, like a Jesus or a Buddha or a Rama, that is the personal God. And for the bhakt, the practitioner of devotion, that is the object of our devotion. We fall in love with Jesus. We fall in love with Ramakrishna or Holy Mother or Buddha. And that is why God does that, or at least one of our projected reasons of why God does this, why God manifests every now and then, is to basically give the undivided absolute the unchanging absolute, to give that a handle so that we can hang on to it, so we can grab it somehow. All right. And then the impersonal is the unmanifest God, Satchitananda, the nature of love, wisdom, and being. Right. And so when God is the impersonal, he's unchanging. And that unchanging is of the nature of Satchitananda, love, wisdom, and being. Right. So when a drum is silent, nobody's banging on it. It's just what it is. When somebody goes over and bangs on that drum, then you get the manifestation of the drum through the sound. Right. And so that's what he's talking about here. But if you can look at the drum and know the sound, or hear the sound and know the drum, that's the Vigyani, who can take the drum and make music with it. Right? The Gyani is just one who knows that it makes music and can sit there and pound on it, but can't really get it to make music. Just pounds on it. Brahman alone has become everything. So what is Brahman? Brahman is like that dream substance. That's the first place that I really started to think that I understood something or was understanding the nature of it. When you dream at night, when you go into that dream, something has become everything, right? In that dream world that you're seeing, that you're experiencing while you're sleeping, you're experiencing it as the real world, and it's just as real as the real world. There's water there, there's earth there, there's fire there, there's air there, all the elements are there. And yet they aren't, right? In your dream, the mountain is not made from rocks. In your dream, the ocean is not made of water. In your dream, the air is not made of air, right? What is it? Well, in your dream, you get a firsthand, very explicit experience of Brahman becoming everything, because it is Brahman in your dream world that you are seeing, and only Brahman. And what is the light that you're seeing in your dream? Because there's not a sun in your head. There's not a moon in your head. No, actually there is, but to give you light, right? And so what is the light you're seeing? The light is your light of awareness. It is God that is illuminating everything with love, the light of love. So Brahman alone has become everything. So understand that not just in your dream world is everything composed of Brahman, even though it looks like sticks and stones. In your waking world also, everything is made of Brahman. And we've talked about why that's true. Therefore, to be Vigyani, this world is a mansion of mirth, right? So he's just in bliss because he has no attachment. He knows himself to be immortal. He's not the body, so he doesn't get hungry. He doesn't get tired. He's not the mind, so he doesn't get frustrated. He doesn't get lusty. He doesn't get angry, right? And he is a knower of God. He's not a positor of God or a preacher of God. He knows. He is a knower of God. And so he experiences the divine nature. Literally, he picks up a rock and knows it to be love itself. Sees light and knows it to be emanating from the divine itself. He's not fooled into any of the narratives that you and I give all of these elements and explanations that we have for our reality. He lets the moment explain itself. He does not project any explanation on it himself. So Brahman alone has become everything. So Satchitananda has become everything, as it were. Therefore, to be Vigyani, this world is a mansion of mirth. But to the Gyani, it's a framework of illusion, right? We know it to be unreal. We haven't quite yet mastered it in the knowledge of a Vigyani, so we can't actually cook with it, for a lack of any other way of saying it. Ram Prasad described the world as a framework of illusion. Another man said to him by way of a retort, he says, "This very world is a mansion of mirth. Here I can eat, here drink and make merry. O physician, you are a fool. You see only the surface of things. Janaka's might was unsurpassed. What did he lack of the world or the spirit? Holding to one as well as the other, he drank his milk from a brimming cup. Right. So this for the Vijnani, knowing that there's no way to be separate from God, knowing. Okay, that's very important. Uh, yeah, how to say that in a way, because this is where that notion really comes from, that we have to have our religion has to break out. It has to break the boundary of our head. It has to break the boundary of our mind and become living, become dynamic within us, so that we are actually learning of God by breathing, learning of God by being awake and walking from one end of the house to the other. Knowing that with knowledge of God, we pick up the soap, and with the knowledge of God, we take a shower, and with the knowledge of God, we brush our teeth, right? And we're never fooled into thinking that it's a toothbrush, never fooled into thinking it's a kitchen, never fooled into thinking it's a body. We know that every interaction of our daily life is a dance with the divine, and that the nature of our beloved divine is this unlimited love, this unlimited wisdom, through this joy of being, the bliss of being. And so our life becomes a dance of bliss, knowing every moment is spent in the company of that divine immortal. So he says Janaka's might. Janaka was a householder who realized God. And so his might was unsurpassed. He had the world in one hand and he had the spirit in the other, right? He could operate in the world as a householder, and he could operate in the world as a monastic or a knower of Brahman as well. He had both. So he could not be surpassed. And what did he live in? He lived in a world of bliss. He drank his milk from a brimming cup. He knew everything is always full. There's never a lack of anything. He knows that he has become everything and needs nothing outside of that. The Vijnani enjoys the bliss of God in a richer way, right? This is the thing. We're going to enjoy this world evermore. Don't think that we're going to be pouty church people one day, happy because we're sad, and nothing's real. No, we're going to get ever more blissful. We're going to get ever more loving. We're going to enjoy life ever more deeply. This is what spiritual life does for us by teaching us who we are and how that entity of Satchitananda finds bliss, how it is most helpful, how it is most fulfilled. And as we know that, then it's just a matter of remembering it and going forward. So the Vijnani enjoys the bliss of God in a richer way. Some have heard of milk, some have seen it, and some have drunk it. The Vijnani has drunk milk, enjoyed it, and been nourished, been filled by it, been energized by it, right? So you understand, I hate to say this because it sounds so demeaning to God, but we learn how to use God, right? We learn what the practical nature of God is, not just the imaginary friend that gives us comfort in dark times right now. We just kind of cling on to a word, not something we learned from a book or that our parents handed down to us, but something that we know how to use it in order to mint joy out of nothing. We've learned how to touch it so that we can cure the despondency and depression of the mind in a click, in a snap. That's the Vijnani. He knows the presence of God, as well as he knows how to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. The master remained silent for a few moments. It's always interesting when he talks about these higher realms and says something about them. It always puts him in a mood where it says immediately afterward, he sat in silence for a moment, right? And because that's the nature of God. When we when we remember that pure love, when we remember that fullness, just suddenly words are so wearisome. The just getting caught up in narratives of any kind is such an entanglement that the mind grabs the thought of God and just wants to sit there, just like a child with their stuffed animal. Just. Mm-hmm. Everything's all right now. The master remained silent a few moments and then asked Pandit Shashidhar to have a smoke. So there you go. Ramakrishna offered someone to smoke, which means he had to be smoking himself. The Pandit went to the southeast veranda to smoke. Soon he came back to the room and sat on the floor with the devotees. Seated on the small couch, the master continued his conversation. Master to the Pandit, let me tell you something. There are three kinds of ananda, or joy. One is worldly enjoyment, the joy of worship, and the three kinds of ananda, the joy of worldly enjoyment, the joy of worship, and the joy of Brahman. The joy of worldly enjoyment is the joy of woman and gold, lust and greed, right? We enjoy the things of the body. We go out for good food at a restaurant. We go out to hear a good band at the club. We go out to dance, to enjoy the things of the body. And we know what the nature of that is. The things of the body are always very short-lived, right? So it's a wonderful joy, there's no doubt. But it's a joy that only lasts as long as the circumstance or lasts as long as the condition. After the circumstance or condition is gone, all you're left with is an echo that will make you wish for it again. And so that's the nature of worldly enjoyment, right? So he says that's lust and greed. The joy of worship is one enjoys the chanting and the names and glories of God, right? So you enjoy singing the names of God because it reminds you of your experiences. It reminds you of touching the divine. It reminds you of the love. It awakens that love nature inside. And if you're doing it well with earnestness and sincerity, you generate a mood, an atmosphere of love inside. And the nice thing about that form of joy is that it comes whenever you chant the name of God or whenever you think of these divine things. It's present for you, right? You don't have to go out and do something separate from yourself in order to cultivate it. And the third one, the joy of Brahman, is the joy of God vision. When you're seeing God everywhere, you're seeing everyone as your divine beloved, and you're talking to him, not as if you're talking to him, but when you're talking to people that you're talking to him. When you're muttering a prayer that you're talking to her. These things experientially, right? And that joy never ceases. That joy never changes, never goes away, never weakens. Nothing can take that from you. That is the joy of life itself. The joy of worldly enjoyment is the joy of lust and greed. People always enjoy that. The joy of worship one enjoys while chanting the names and glories of God. And the joy of Brahman is the joy of God vision. After experiencing the joy of God vision, the rishis of olden times went beyond all rules and conventions. That's the freedom. When you come to know, and I always emphasize that because we don't have a word for it. It's a proper word for it. To know something in the sense of, there's that word grok. If you're a nerd, you know the word grok. Grok is from that novel called Stranger in a Strange Land, in which an alien comes to Earth, and everybody thinks he's Jesus or like Jesus, and that's the whole point of the book. And but he comes and he's he uses that word grok, which means that it's that having that practical living knowledge of something, not just head knowledge, not just philosophical knowledge of it. So we're looking for a notion of God that is dynamic, freshly alive in the moment. And with that, we go beyond all rules and regulations. Once you've seen God, once you see God everywhere, and you can't not see that, then there is no right and wrong, up and down, left or right. You know that all of that is made up, that none of this is real. And because it's not real, there are no rules. And because there are no rules, it can be anything that you choose. Your life can be interpreted in any way that you like. And in that freedom is where we find our bliss, where we find that sense of freedom, that sense of expansion, to come to know that your inner world is infinite. It's not just the red and brown that you see when you close your eyes real tight, but that there's an infinity within you, an infinity beyond all rules and conventions. Chaitanya Deva used to experience three spiritual states: the inmost, the semi-conscious, and the conscious. In the inmost state, he would see God and go into samadhi, right? That's when you chant the Om and you're in the presence and there's nothing to be said. You're absorbed in the infinity of love, the unconditioned nature of love. In the inmost state, he would see God and go into samadhi. He would be in the state of jhana samadhi. In the semi-conscious state, he would be partially conscious of the outer world, right? Partially conscious of the outer world means that you sort of have an idea of yourself within the context of other, so there is some awareness out there. In the conscious state, he would sing the name and glories of God, right? So that's just living in the world as we do. And we remember God in the world. So we're just being mindful of God. We're not yet to the point where we're seeing him everywhere, not quite to the point where we're making butter out of him, but certainly at the point where we're glad that we at least have an indicator of that presence, happy to at least have a practice and a time where we can find some solace, some comfort in that description. So in the conscious state, he could sing the names and glories of God. And Hazra says to the Pandit, so now your doubts are solved. Samadhi described, the master to the Pandit. What is samadhi, right? Samadhi is that one pointed focus on a single thing for, I don't know, 20 seconds or more. in that little vlog we did on meditation, it's like one moment of focus is being able to is constant, or what is it, 12 seconds of focus is known as concentration. 12 units of concentration is known as samadhi, right? Something like that. They break it down that way. So basically what we're trying to do is think of the name or think of God and God alone, and then expand that as long as we can. And if we can expand it beyond, I'm sure these timings are made up, but, for 24 seconds or for 100 seconds, if you can just have that thought of God, that's samadhi. If you can do it just for a moment, that's concentration, right? If you can do it for several moments, that's absorption, right? But the final one is samadhi. Samadhi is the complete merging of the mind in God consciousness. The Jnani experiences jhana samadhi, in which no trace of I is left. No trace of I. That means he has no location. He is everywhere. Okay, we can't even talk about that. There is no way that we will be able to overcome our habit of referring to ourselves in a time and place, right? We are so convinced that we are in time and in a place that to break this here, these are almost only words delivered to us. But in jhana samadhi, there is not a trace of I left. You see, I want to say things about that and then try and describe it. But of course, there's only an ego self here, right? I have a point, a place and time of reference. And how do I break out of that, having always simply been thinking in terms of time and place? And so to be outside of time, outside of place, we have no sense of I whatsoever in jhana samadhi. All right. The samadhi attained through the path of bhakti is called Chaitanya samadhi. All right. And in this samadhi, there remains the consciousness of I. the eye of the servant and the master relationship, the eye of the lover and the beloved relationship, the eye of the enjoyer and the food relationship, the eye of God as the master and the devotee as the servant, God is the beloved, the devotee the lover, God is the food and the devotee the enjoyer. I don't want to be sugar, I want to eat it. So the samadhi in of the Gyan of the bhakta is still has a sense of particularity in it, but the sole reason of that particularity is so you can dance properly with God. So that you can dance with God or sing to God or sit there and touch his cheek and tell him how wonderful he is or she is, right? So there's just enough I to enjoy God. Pundit, what will happen if God dissolves all of the I, if he changes the enjoyer himself into sugar? Master smiling. Come, come, tell me what is in your mind. But don't the scriptures mention Narada, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sananda, and Sanat Kumara? Pandit, yes, sir, they do. Master, though they were Gyanis, yet they kept the eye of the Bhakta. Haven't you read the Bhagavata? Pandit, I've read only part of it, not the whole. Master, well, pray to God. He's full of compassion. Will he not listen to the words of his devotees? He is the Kalpataru, right? The wish-fulfilling tree. You will get whatever you desire from him. And this is part of what makes our practice dynamic, right? It's like you don't have to run and ask a Swami if you don't know something. You don't have to run and find a teacher external to yourself. Really, the best way of understanding the scripture is to sit in the presence of the scripture in silence and take it to the mother. Say, Mother, what did that sentence mean? You might even thought that you have understood it, but assume that you didn't. Take it to the mother and say, Mother, what does that mean? And then just sit quiet. Don't try and ruminate it. Don't sit there and think. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to sit in silence. Thinking is noise. So you place your question before mother, and then you just sit silently until a knowing comes. And a knowing is not a thought. It's knowing. You know what it means. You're like, yes, I see that. It's clear as day. Right? And so when you read scripture, read it in the company of the beloved, as if you believed in God, as if you thought God was really going to teach you something and really going to show you something, because God does in fact, he is the only one that can teach you something, the only one that can show you something. And so allow that to happen and use that. Train yourself to be a Vijnani, where you study in active conversation with the divine beloved. That's why he says, pray to God. And the next thing he says after pray to God is, he is full of compassion. Why would you do that? Because God is quite something, right? If we ever see God in his highest manifestation, like Arjuna in the chariot, we're going to be terrified, right? When Arjuna saw it, he saw this gnashing of teeth that were, eating the devotees and chewing them and swallowing them, and the devotees were getting caught between his teeth. And I mean, it's a terrifying thing. So when Ramakrishna, he says, yes, pray to God, but whenever you go before God, remember to prepare your mind. God is compassionate. So you have to protect yourself with the knowledge that God is compassionate, so that when you're encountering this divine beloved, you're not overwhelmed in terror. Always remember, God is compassionate. And that's where we find our faith. That's what faith is for. Faith is to give you confidence in the presence of God. Right? So pray to God. He's full of compassion. Will he not listen to the words of his devotee? It's like, question your doubt. Will not that which is everywhere present and always perfect, will that not hear you? Will that not be in harmony with you? He is the Kalpataru, the wish-fulfilling tree. all that you think that you need, he is. So learn to find all of your contentment in the moment. Practice it so that when you're feeling restless, you don't think, oh, I need to go out and do something. No, go to God to take care of your restlessness. Oh, I'm lonely. Let me go call my friends. No, go to God and take care of your loneliness. Oh, I'm angry. Let me go punch the side of a bus. No, go to the shrine and take care of your anger in the company of God. That's a big change when God actually becomes useful in your life, not just a guiding principle, but becomes a companion, becomes a solution to your troubles. That's why they say as a person grows more and more spiritual, they tend to spend more and more time alone because they don't need anything. They don't need a distraction. They don't need the tablets anymore. They are just enjoying the present, the moment. The profundity of it is enough. Pundit, I haven't thought deeply about these things before, but now I do understand. Master, God keeps a little of I in his devotee even after giving him the knowledge of Brahman. That little bit of I is the I of the devotee, the I of the Jnani. Through that I, the devotee enjoys the infinite play of God. Right? So God allows you a touch of ignorance, just enough belief that you exist separate and apart, so that you can enjoy a good hug and a big wet kiss. Right? Just so you can know that God is teasing you, that God's tricking you, God's playing with you, God's pranking you, all of these things. And you can know during your day that if you look around in any moment, even this moment, look around your room, I'm sure that God has hidden something peculiarly beautiful around you right now, just to remind you of love. Right? So a Vijnani is someone who lives life noticing those things constantly. These little vignettes of perfect love that are everywhere present, but very rarely noticed by the person going about their workaday life. Through that eye, the devotee enjoys the infinite play of God. The pestle was almost worn out with rubbing. Only a little was left. That fell into the underbrush and brought about the destruction of the lunar race, the race of the Yadus. The Vijnani retains the eye of the devotee and the eye of the Jnani in order to taste the bliss of God and to teach people, right? That's a reference to that story. Greg, do you know that story? Are you here? Yeah. About the pestle that killed the race of the Yadus.
It's
That,
probably at the end of the Mahabharata or the Srimad Bhagavatam, but I've not read the whole story.
yeah. There's something about it that just that little splinter was enough to
Trigger.
that yeah, there was a curse and someone hid the pestle so that there would the curse couldn't be realized, and so they threw the small little sliver of it away, the last little sliver, but lo and behold, that was enough.
It is crazy, just even in our recent history, World War One was started by one bullet.
Yeah,
The,
no, it's
the Civil War was started by one bullet.
yeah, no,
Krishna
that's
was killed by an arrow. He was just resting in the forest, and a hunter thought his foot was a deer, and he shot him, and the arrow went into his body, and I think it might have been a poisoned arrow or something.
wow. Yeah, so he's talking and he's just, where are we now? Yeah, so the Vijnani retains the eye of the devotee and the eye of the Jnani. Why? In order to taste the bliss of God, right? How wonderful when our ego exists simply to enjoy God, not to enjoy all the thousands of other things of body mind, which is why we keep the ego now or are not able to get rid of it now. but to come to the place where we hold on to it just to enjoy. It's what taught us how to enjoy life without getting stuck, how to enjoy living without suffering. The rishis of old times had timid natures. They were easily frightened. Do you know their attitude? It was like, let me somehow get my own salvation. Who cares for others? A hollow piece of driftwood somehow manages to float, but it sinks if even a bird sits on it. But Narada and sages of his kind are like a huge log that not only can float across to the other shore, but can carry many animals and other creatures as well. A steamship itself crosses the ocean and also carries people across. So this is that notion. In the beginning, we have to stay away from certain people because we're not strong enough. We get pulled into that worldliness. But in the end, we can pull the whole world to God. Right? In the end, once we've learned how to manage our mind and how to manage the body, and in the end, when we've come into a working knowledge of the nature of ourself and we've known how to simply lift ourselves out of suffering instantaneously by taking refuge, at that point, the world cannot hold you down. For you, there are no more restrictions, limitations. For you, you can drag everyone to the feet of the Lord laughing, right? It's effortless. You need nothing because you know who you are. And it's just inspiring to you in every moment. Right. And so that's when God can use you. If you depend on God, this is so important. Really, this is one of those things. I've learned it in the last 2 years by coming here to do this work. When I got here and realized I had no idea what I was doing, I had no idea what was needed, I had no idea what people wanted. And when I sat down on that very first night when my shrine was put together for the first time in my room and I sat in front of it, I just went to Mother and I said, Mother, I'm here, but I have no idea. No idea what to do. Right. And that's where I learned that trick of silence, where you lay it your questions before the divine, and then you just sit in silence until you know. Right. And Mother would put those ideas and those inspirations in. And we go through life like that, and we don't take responsibility for it because we're not the one that decided it. I went to Mother for that. So Mother made those decisions. She gave me that knowing. And it works brilliantly. But I don't get arrogant about it because it wasn't my idea and I didn't do it. I went to the Mother and she gave me a knowing. And so we begin to live like that, where we are not the ones doing and we know it. And we consciously keep our mind on the presence of the beloved always. And we don't do anything without acknowledging the presence of the beloved, and without sitting in silence, waiting for the prompting for the next thing, whatever it is. And you can practice that and live like that, regardless of whether you're in the world or in the monastery. Doesn't matter. Teachers like Narada belonged to a class of the Vijnani. They were much more courageous than the other rishis. They are like an expert satrancha player, whichever that might be. You must have noticed how he shouts as he throws the dice. What do I want? 6. No, 5. Here is 5. And every time he throws the dice, he gets the number he wants. He is such a clever player. And while playing, he even twirls his mustache. A mere Gyani trembles with fear. He is like an amateur satrancha player. He is anxious to move his pieces somehow to the safety zone where they won't be overtaken by his opponent. But a Vijnani isn't afraid of anything. This sounds like a game sort of like backgammon. He has realized both aspects of God, personal and impersonal. He has talked with God. He has enjoyed the bliss of God. It is a joy to merge the mind in the indivisible Brahman through contemplation. And it is also a joy to keep the mind on the Leela, the relative, without dissolving it in the absolute. A mere Gyani is a monotonous person. He always analyzes, saying, it's not this, not this. The world is like a dream. but I have raised both my hands. Therefore, I accept everything. Right? That's why with Ramakrishna, he was never dry. I think it was such a sweet fear that he had. Oh, mother, don't make me a dry sadhu. I don't want to be dry and just sitting here drooling. I want to be full of love. I want to be full of life. I want to serve everyone. I want to have compassion for everyone. I want to teach. I want to enjoy the love of the devotees, and I want to enjoy your love. And somehow he managed to do that while being both a Gyani, a seer, a knower of Brahman, and a Bhakta, a child of the mother, right? He managed to do all of that and to not leave us with any sense of restriction, but with an understanding that spiritual life is about a constant expansion, a constant expansion of your ability to love, a constant expansion of your ability to accept the moment with whatever it brings to you. No expectations, no preferences, no aversions. You see the moment as the company of your beloved, and you're not going to change a thing. You're at peace, you're in love, and you're expressing it constantly. Listen to a story. Once a woman went to see a friend of hers who was a weaver. The weaver, who had been spinning different kinds of silk thread, was very happy to see her friend and said to her, "Friend, I can't tell you how happy I am to see you. Let me get you some refreshments." She left the room. The woman looked at the threads of different colors, and she was tempted to steal one. She hid a bundle of thread under one arm. The weaver returned presently with the refreshments and began to feed her guest with great enthusiasm. But looking at the thread, she realized that her friend had taken a bundle. Hitting upon a plan to get it back, she said, "Friend, it's been so long since I've seen you. This is a day of great joy for me. I feel very much like asking you to dance with me." The friend said, "Sister, I am feeling very happy too." So the two friends began to dance together. When the weaver saw that her friend danced without raising her hands, she said, "Friend, let us dance with both hands raised. This is the day of great joy." But the guest pressed one arm to her side and danced, raising only the one other arm. The weaver said, "How is this, friend? Why should you dance with only one hand raised? Dance with me, raising both hands. Look at me. See how I can dance with both hands raised." But the guest still pressed one arm to her side. She danced with the other arm raised and said with a smile, "This is all I know of dancing." The master continued, "I don't press my arm to my side. Both my hands are free. I'm not afraid of anything. I accept both the Nitya and the Leela, both the absolute and the relative." This, people, he has given us such a perfect clue here. If you try and hold on to the world and also try and go get God, you're the person dancing with one hand down because you're afraid of losing the things of the world, your identity in the world, your lust and your greed and your friends and your family and your children and your grandchildren, your houses and cars. If you're trying to hold on to those things, all you will ever know of dancing is one-arm dancing, because you're always going to have this sense of fear of holding on, this feeling of responsibility, or this something else calling your mind or calling your heart, right? And you won't be able to just abandon yourself in bliss, to abandon yourself in the presence of God, right? So always watch yourself carefully. All of us are like this. I mean, we're all of us are dancing with one hand. There's no doubt about that. Myself equally included in that. But it's the awareness of it. First of all, you see yourself dancing with one hand and you laugh. You're like, "Look at you, fool." You're still holding on to that stuff, right? But you don't get upset. You keep dancing. You keep dancing. And after some time, you're going to forget that you've got that extra spool under your arm that you've stolen from the world. And you're going to get caught up in the dancing, and you're going to raise both those hands. And that spool of yarn is going to come falling out from your armpit. And you won't care. You won't care in the lightest. You will dance with an ecstasy of bliss. So don't hold on to the world. There's nothing to hold on to. You're not going to lose a thing. It's a dream. And there are only dream things to lose. They are not real. All right. We'll stop there for the evening.